I'm Shalina Tobin, aka Posh Nosh Gal, and today I'm joined by the fabulous chef Calum Franklin. Calum has turned the humble skill of pie making into an absolute art form. As executive head chef at the Pie Room at the Holborn Dining Room, he's come a long way from cleaning pots and pans as a teenager in southeast London and was crowned Katie's Chef of the Year 2019. Callum's creativity in the skill of wrapping bundles of flavor with pastry has made him a global Instagram sensation. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today, Callum. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. So it's a third time closing for you guys. How are you
Yeah.
all feeling?
Yeah, I mean, there's frustration. Anger's not going to change anything at the moment. So we're trying to look at the positives of it. Our team gets to have Christmas off
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Everybody, which is the first time in 7 years since we opened the restaurant. So actually, yeah, I mean,
So you got to look at the positives.
yeah, of course you do. You
Yeah.
can't, otherwise you just get into sort of pit of despair, right? So Um, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. We have to close the restaurant down. There's going to be a loss of stock, as you can imagine. But we're a big business, and we have to find ways to use that, and we'll be fine. We'll be
Yeah.
fine.
And what had you been doing over lockdown? I mean, did you do takeaways with the pies?
So in the first lockdown, the long lockdown, I mean, it's difficult for us to do takeaway here because this area of London, when something like lockdown happens, it's pretty empty, right? There's not a lot of residential around this area. It's pretty quiet. So, in terms of doing takeaway or delivery, it's quite complex. So, we decided we would put the team that wanted to, I mean, some people wanted to like watch Netflix and relax, right? And I get that. People earn breaks. So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, 100%. But there were people that were like, chef, we want something to do, we want to be busy. So I came up with like a little plan. Uh, Around the time that you saw chefs everywhere sort of piling food into hospitals. Now I kind of looked at that and was like, I don't want to jump on the sort of bandwagon of doing that. And I've word that I was getting was that quite often it was excessive, like a lot of
There's
food
a
was
lot of
going
food
into
going out.
hospitals.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, why don't we do something that would be a more permanent thank you for a hospital?
Hmm.
So we created a little pie project, which actually it's based around where I live in southeast London. So there's a local butcher there called Drings, which is amazing, which is in Greenwich. And I spoke to the boss there, Michael, and said, "Look, I've got this idea." And he said, "Stop! I've got an idea as well. Let's." And I was like, "Well, let's hear it." And it turned out we pretty much had the same plan. So we made pies at the hotel with meat provided by Drings, and then that extended to be a local business project. So the cheese shop next door was supplying dairy. The local baker, Paul Rhodes, was supplying flour. Local brewery, Broccoli Brewery, was giving us beer for steak and ale pies. And we were
Amazing.
putting that, yeah, it was brilliant. It was a lovely sort of South London thing. And we were putting that all towards making pies for sale in Drings, where all profit, all proceeds, everything earned is going towards building a garden at Greenwich and Lewisham Hospital for the
Oh,
staff,
wow.
right? Yeah, so that's in process now. We raised 10 grand in the end. The
Oh,
project,
brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a really nice thing to be part of,
Yeah.
and the chefs were happy, they were busy. So, and also, yeah, I mean, just the way the local community in Southeast London kind of took to that as well. We sold a lot of pies.
And what are you going to plan for this lockdown? So what are your plans now?
I mean, this one's a bit more fragmented, right? I mean, we haven't got an end date for it yet.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to put pressure on, front of house and back of house team at the restaurant to feel that they have to do anything over Christmas. Actually, I want them to sort of spend it with their families
And just let them
and
enjoy
loved
it.
ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you use the time to gain inspiration? I mean, I watched a short video. It was called "At the Table."
Yeah,
Stunningly made. You talk about how you take inspiration from architecture and reproduce it in your pastries. The process is so interesting and intricate, and the detail that you go into it is just phenomenal. Can you just talk us through a little bit about that?
about the process.
Yeah, about
Yeah,
where you get inspiration
yeah.
from.
I mean, I think in that film I talk about seeing it in architecture in London, but um, genuinely it can be something that just sparks an idea. So uh, I'm working on a project at the moment to do something quite complex and quite out there. And that was sparked by watching a TV documentary on the pyramids, right? So that thing got me thinking in terms of what our perception as sort of modern culture was of pyramids at the time and the complexities of it. So yeah, I kind of fixate on details. That's my problem.
Well, I've
And
heard
that
it takes you 6 months to perfect recipe.
yeah, because we do in my eyes we do simple things, right? So actually that's quite often harder to try and perfect than something more elaborate, because there's literally nowhere to hide. It's all about having something absolutely 100% nailed. I mean, you never will quite get there, and I never feel we have, but you can get as close to it as you can,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like fixating on details, I mean that's something that like lifelong has I've always had that, and like I realized I did it this morning. So I was on my way to work this morning, and I was listening to a song which is um, "The First Cut Is the Deepest" by PP Arnold, and I I genuinely sat down for 10 minutes and I listened to her on repeat one word that she sings at the beginning of the song because of the way she sings it. And I know it sounds really weird, but it is just like magical, beautiful music and things like that. All day I see little things like that. I've got a very strange brain, very strange brain.
I wouldn't call it strange. I mean, it's definitely complex and very, very creative. But you went from designing pies to designing, your own pie room, and that
Mm.
comes, I guess, from your love of architecture. You just mentioned pyramids as well. I find that so interesting. I mean, how long did that process take to design a pie room?
Um, yeah, I mean, the design was, I guess, probably 6 months to sort of get it all down onto paper as to what I envisioned, how it would finish. It was a year to build it, which was a long time for like a
That is a
small
long
room.
time. Yeah.
But it's because I was really sort of adamant that by the time I'd finished, like this was the idea and this is how I want it. Finding someone that could build it, right? Because I mean, I'm not an architect, so I maybe, I mean, there were certainly things that I put into that build that were complex and were difficult to put together. And we went through, I think, 3 companies before we found someone that was said they could do it all and
Wow.
without a problem. And we stuck firm, and that's why it took so long. But we got exactly what we
Got exactly
wanted
what
at
you
the end of
wanted.
it, which is like a perfect room for making pies.
Yeah, yeah. When I think of quintessential British food, I think fish and chips and pies. But
Mm.
pies sort of faded into the background, and you've really brought them back into fashion. Would you say it's a trend, or a pie's here to stay?
No, I mean, it's historically that's happened, right?
Yeah,
Since, I mean, we have written history of that over 600 years where you can look at it because it's been a constant in our country. There's always been there pie making, right? But there's been centuries where it's the height of fashion, and then there's been centuries where it's back to the peasant's table. And I think that we're at the end of one of those sort of lulls where it's not fashionable. It's seen sort of as pretty poor food. That's because of the extent of industrialization of food in the last century. But in so many different aspects of life, you see that movement back now towards handwork and
Yeah.
craftsmanship,
Yeah.
and that's what we're doing for pies for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And the details is beautiful. But not only have you brought back traditional British pies, but you've also evolved them into what I think, Britain represents today, which is such a multicultural society. And you've got things like, I got your book actually, and it's
Thank
so
you.
interesting. You've got things like Kima spice cottage pie, Moroccan
Mm.
chickpea feta pie, Nduja stuffed brioche, coronation chicken pie. It's a representation of modern Britain, isn't it? It's all wrapped up
Yeah,
in pastry.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I grew up in London and never really felt that, like, you know, those things were alien to me. They surrounded us in the city because of the different cultures here. So for me, yeah, it was a representation of, as you said, of modern Britain.
Yeah, yeah. And you started back in 2014, started selling one pie, and now you're selling, is it 200 pies a day or is it more than that now?
Yeah, it might be more than that now. Yeah,
What's your most
the guy.
popular pie?
I think our biggest selling is probably it's pretty much always the chicken and mushroom pie that we have a variation of throughout the year. But I mean, actually, this year we sold a lot of our vegetarian pie, which is the caramelized onion, dauphinoise potato, and Comté cheese,
Right.
which is a version of in the book. We kind of did a large version of that in the book, but that for me was like it's my favorite pie because when we opened the pie room, we had 4 pies on the menu, all of which were meat, and there was that sort of drive to get a vegetarian pie on there. But we didn't rush it. We were like, no, we're not doing it until there's one that's brilliant, and one that really stands up against the other ones. So uh, yeah, that was a long time coming, and actually my head chef Mark had a lot of work in that, but I love it. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite pie yourself?
I mean, like classic pork pie for me, but a hot one, right? A hot pork pie. I think the first time I had that was at a pub in the Cotswolds. And I remember I was like, why have I never had a hot pork pie before? It's brilliant, right? I
Yeah.
mean, cold pork pies are great for like road trips and stuff like that. But when it's hot and all the fats just sort of become soft and juicy, and yeah, it's very good. Very good.
You make it sound really good.
Yeah.
And I heard in an interview actually you gave last year, you gave yourself 6 out of 10 for your pies. So what do you give
Mm,
yourself now?
yeah, probably the same. I still feel
Really?
that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much more to learn and to sort of practice, and techniques to develop. Um, on a 6 out of 10 is a push as well, right? I feel that closer to a 5 maybe, because there is this world of opportunity with it, and that's what excites me about it.
Mm,
And that's why I don't sleep at night, because I genuinely lie there in bed almost every night thinking of, like, oh, what if we did this, or what if we did that,
yeah.
or I've seen something that has just opened up a little window of opportunity. I mean, there was one recently, and it was, we're now working with 3D tech companies. So um, that has sort of blown open this new set of techniques for us in terms of what we can do and the limitations of that. Um, I can now scan something on my phone, send it to a 3D printing company. They can work on a mold based on anything, which is nuts.
Amazing.
And, like,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm very excited at the moment as to where we can go with things. So 5 out of 10.
So you've actually gone down a notch.
Yeah, I've taken myself down.
Well, I think 3D printing is actually amazing. And yeah, there's no limit to what you're going to be able to do.
Mm,
So yeah, a lot of sleepless nights for you.
yeah, yeah, that'll never change, I think.
Well, the likes of Thomas Keller, he ranks you pretty high because he sends his brigade over to you to train.
Yeah, we've had quite a few of the team over from actually
Yeah.
from different restaurants in his group, which is lovely. And actually, I first time one of his chefs came over, I was really nervous about it because I know how he runs his kitchens. I've friends that have worked in his kitchens for long periods of time, so I've talked to them about it. I've been in his kitchens when I've dined at the restaurants and seen how they're operated, and and it's run with a discipline that is almost military, right? Not in a bad way at all. Like, just it's how they're very sort of structured, and my kitchen's not like that, right? It's not. We
Well,
have a
I've heard you
much,
play jazz and soul music in your kitchen.
yeah, right, and it's much softer atmosphere.
Yeah,
When things are busy and it's serious, yeah, it's serious, but during the daytime, I want the chefs to have a good time and be happy. And I was always nervous when the first chef came over from the group about how they would react to that, because it's
mm,
that's what they know, and then this is
yeah,
very different. And I was like talking to the chefs, my senior chefs, and I was like, do we change the way we behave when they're here? And I was like, no, actually, no. I mean, they have to adapt to that. And actually, when they came over, they loved it. They love seeing a different style of kitchen that
yeah.
works. Right? And that's all that matters, is that it works. So um yeah, and we've loved having them over with us. We built a really nice relationship with that group.
Yeah. And did they take any of your, like the way you guys work in your kitchens, did they implement that in their own kitchens as well?
I don't know about that.
No jazz music for them?
No jazz music, I don't think. But actually, what one thing that was lovely was I was over in New York in end of January, beginning of February, and was doing an event there. And we stopped for lunch at Per Se, which is one of Keller's restaurants in New York.
Yeah.
And Sarah, who was the sous chef there at the time, she'd worked with us in London. She came out in the middle of the meal and presented a dish which was based on her time with us in London.
Oh,
It
nice.
was amazing, and yeah, incredible. It was like a meal of a lifetime as well. We got treated very well. It was lovely.
Oh, that must have
Lovely.
been such a lovely moment for you. Super
Mm.
special.
Yeah, absolutely. And also that, her chef had given her the time
Yeah.
separately from her work to be able to do that,
Yeah.
and that meant a lot to us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we've got to talk about your Instagram success. Actually, I want to touch
Mm.
on that. So 121K, did you ever think that it would be such a hit?
Never. No. I think we got to a point where I was kind of looking at Instagram sometimes, but honestly, very rarely at the beginning, because I felt that food was moving in a direction that I wasn't as interested in. Right.
Mm,
I'm always interested in looking at food, but um, I don't know. When we opened the restaurant, I felt that what I wanted to do was a little bit. It was like, when you're on an escalator, you hold on to the handle of an escalator, and it sort of tugs away from you, and you have to move
mhm,
your hand back down, and it moves at a different speed.
mhm.
That's how I felt food was moving. It was moving away from me, and it was, fermentation and all these kind of things that wasn't really me. And it what Instagram actually gave me was sort of clarification on that thing, because my wife said to me, look, why don't you put your food on Instagram? And I was like, it's all brown and it's boring. I don't think no one's interested in seeing that. It's not colorful, it's not modern. And she said, well, try it, because I think people will be interested. So I did that, and yeah, it was this sort of instant recognition for it, which we never expected. And that
Yeah,
was when, that gave me that feeling of like, I was talking about the escalator. It was like letting go of that thing and not worrying about it. Like,
yeah,
I'm just going to do my thing over here and focus on that. And it was lovely.
yeah,
And when that happened, that was when we went all, full steam ahead with it.
yeah. So is what your wife's brilliant idea. And you know what they
Yeah, it
say,
was. Yeah,
behind every successful man is a woman kicking his backside.
yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So your book, The Pyram, it's only been
Yeah.
out 3 months, and I love that
Mm,
you start off by teasing us a little bit with this romantic story of your parents being bakers, and as a child you were
mm,
perched up on a bag of flour watching them work. And then in reality, I mean, things couldn't have been more different for you, could they?
No.
Talk to us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in a very sort of normal household. Uh, my mum worked for the NHS, and my dad worked as an engineer in oil, and so he worked all over the world. But I mean, as a family, it was me and my brothers really, and my mum quite a lot of the time. And very happy, but sort of 80s, 90s food, like British food. So
Yeah.
very simple, and my mum cooked homely meals, but we weren't eating out in posh restaurants, anything like that. And look, the reason I put that in the book, that sort of joke intro into sort of my background, is because I think a lot of people are intimidated by that, because chefs quite often feel they need the validation of saying, I grew up watching my grandmother cook and all of this stuff. And if people don't connect to that, if people don't have that the similar experience, then they feel like, well, maybe this book will be too complicated for me. And I wanted people to understand that it's not always the case,
Yeah.
right? And if I can get to this point of sort of skill and level, then you can too as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. And you started as a pot washer just aged 16,
Mm,
and you've really
yeah.
worked your way up. So you were at amazing places as well. You were at the Ivy and As Hotel, One Aldwych, Roast in Borough Market. I mean,
Mm,
kitchens back then, when you were just, I guess you were just finding your feet, they were just extremely tough, and they still are. I think that time in
yeah.
particular was probably tougher than it is now. How did you find it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. It's definitely difficult. I mean, I think I've got quite a resilient character. So I remember working in a kitchen where you were told this quite often, if you had a really difficult night at work, uh, at the end of the night, you'd hear, a chef say to one of the other chefs, you watch, that he won't come back tomorrow. And for me, I would always be like, well, you wait and see. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be in before you.
Right.
So yeah, I've always kind of like that. I like getting beaten up and
Proving
sort of
people wrong.
pushed. Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Even from school, I was a bit like that. I remember a teacher at school telling me I was going to fail a subject, and I was like, "Up yours! I'm not going to. I'm going to push it." And then when I did, I remember when I passed that exam, I went up to him and said, "I told you I would," and he was like, "I knew you would." And I was like, oh, he was doing it. It was reverse psychology. But
Oh, that's
yeah,
brilliant. When someone
um,
actually tells you you're not going to do it because they want you to do it.
mm,
So the trick is
yeah,
not to let them know that you've got that in you.
yeah, right. But yeah, they were difficult kitchens, and yeah, I mean, some of them, yeah, I catch up with people from those kitchens in those times, and we have, people have psychological problems from those times. Like, I never eat in front of my team at work ever, because I think I was just so smashed at the beginning of my career with the thought of, like, stopping to eat staff food was being lazy, right? If you were seen eating, that was, you never hear the end of it, because you'd
Really?
wasted 5 minutes in a day. And then you're talking
Wow.
about five minutes of a day where you're working 18 hours or 19 hours. So, I mean, like, looking back at that, it's bonkers thinking about it, because, you know, if you ran a car for 18 hours, you have to put fuel in it, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, well, I can look back with hindsight and realize that now. At the time, you just shut up and get on with it. But
Yeah.
we treat people very differently now here, so that we get the best out of people. So we don't make them work, 5 18-hour shifts, 6 18-hour shifts in a row, 10 18-hour shifts in a row, whatever. I mean, none of that happens anymore in our kitchen. But I don't want to, yeah, sort of break people and sort of run them into the ground. That's not my goal here.
And are you able to eat with them now? I mean, are you able to
No,
let
no,
people
honestly, I
know that
don't. I mean, that's a
really?
psychological thing. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, and a lot of the guys from those kitchens have the same thing as well. They're grown
Wow.
adults in their 40s, and Yeah, I can eat in front of my wife. I can eat with friends and stuff like that. But in the workplace, no.
You
Like,
just do you eat before you go to work? Is that?
yeah, or I find a quiet spot on my own and eat.
Oh
Yeah, it's really
wow.
weird, right? Yeah, it can be
Yeah, the
quite
kind of
damaging.
yeah, it is. That's kind of, I guess that's quite traumatic experience actually, and you're still carrying that with you. That must be
Mm,
pretty difficult. Um, so I mean, you've successfully battled through an alcohol addiction and come
mm.
out the other side. And thank you for agreeing to speak with us about this topic.
Yeah, no worries.
But I feel now more than ever, mental health is such a big issue. But talk to us about your challenges, and you know they were very serious in that it almost took your life.
Yeah.
How did it all begin? Was it that sort of environment from the kitchens in the beginning that triggered it, or something
You
else?
know, I mean, when I talk about this, it was a very difficult period of my life. It was a long period of my life, and like you said, I mean, I came extremely close to dying at the end of it. But I also look at it that I'm very lucky it happened the way it did, because uh, I was an alcoholic from the first time I had a drink, and I knew that I drank differently to everybody else, my friends, from very early age. I always drank drunk to get as drunk as possible, which I never understood why different people didn't behave like that. Um, but it was fairly manageable throughout my sort of teens and early 20s. It was pretty bad, to be honest with you. In fact, if you ask my mum, she'd probably say at that age I was really bad, but it
What
really
age
didn't
was
kick
that?
off. So yeah, I mean, honestly, all the way through from like 15 onwards to
Wow.
probably yeah, I mean 28, I guess.
Wow. Right.
So what happened was uh the restaurant industry itself is in a way a bit of an enabler, in that you can go into work as a chef with a pretty bad hangover and keep it fairly under lock, because if you're running around and sweating, no one really notices that that's because you've got a hangover, right? And you can push that hangover out by midday, by gassing all day. Um and then there's the nightlife, which is when I first took a job in central London, which was at the Ivy, we would go out every night in central London. We'd be out in Soho every night. It was very normal behaviour. So that might be less normal behaviour in an office, right? For example. So for me, what I take from that was a benefit for me, was that it accelerated everything, right? So actually, I got much worse much quicker. So when I was at One Aldwych, I was at a point where I was physically addicted to alcohol. So if I didn't drink, my body would shake, right? And I'd get tremors, and it ended up really at the end where I was drinking in the morning before I went to work. So I was drinking on the train, drinking out a bottle of, plastic bottle full of neat vodka, right? And I'd drink that before I went into work as a senior chef, and then go and manage a kitchen. Um, but I think at that point I was in denial, but I was at a point of no return, right? And I would always tell myself, I'd tell my partner, I'd tell my family, I can still beat this. I can get off it. And maybe I'd give the appearance of stopping drinking for a week, but I never did, right?
Mm.
And yeah, I think uh, just I remember when, just before I went to rehab, was probably a week before or 2 weeks before, I'd made an acceptance in my head that I was going to die, right? I don't know what happened, but I was just like, I cannot see a way back from this. Like, I just can't. There's no way I can comprehend how I'm going to stop now, because my body was so physically addicted to it. If I didn't drink every 40 minutes, then I'd go into like an awful tremor where it hurt, my chest would hurt, and yeah, I mean, it's really dangerous. And I kind of, and that was it. I'd given up, right? And my boss at the time at One Aldwych, Tony Fleming, had been like beyond amazing in terms of trying to support me, trying to get help for me, um, being understanding, not just throwing me in the trash sort of thing, um, which I owe him so much for. And at that time, I got so bad that I was off work. Um, and then one day, it's on a New Year's Day, 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, this new year, right? Just woke up and I don't know what it was. I put it down to sort of survival technique, but something in my head said to me, like, okay, this is it. If you don't do something today, you're dead. And
Mm.
I spoke to my older brother and said, I need you to help get me into a rehab. And he was like, I've been waiting for you to ask this forever, right? And that was it. And I went into rehab. I came out, and that was 10 years ago, and I've never drunk since. And it changed my life. It was like absolutely. It was like something that was always holding me back, because that was always what I thought about all the time.
Yeah,
Walk down the street. It was the only thing I ever thought of. In that last sort of 5 years was always about, when am I going to get my next drink?
yeah,
And now that doesn't hang over me. It never factors into my life, which is amazing. So I went to AA for quite a long time, and they talk a lot there about hitting rock bottom and sort of finding this like voice inside you which pulls you out. Um, and I had people rallying around me for a decade, right, trying to tell me to get help and sort of stop this and man, I mean, they could have told me every day, all day long, and it would never have made a difference. It was only when I made the decision, and I made the conscious decision that that's it.
mm,
I can never drink again, and that's okay. Right?
mm,
Actually, it's that understanding, and that I don't know if it's like I do genuinely believe it is like a human instinct thing. It's a nature thing of like your body. It's your mind overriding your body, right? The body is physically addicted to something and will always sort of battle with the mind. And for me, it was like the mind at that one point was strong enough to say, okay, if you don't do something now, it's game over.
yeah,
Um, so for
amazing.
me, it was really about making that conscious decision myself. And
Yeah,
that's something, I talk to people a lot about addiction and try and help people within the industry, or people that have someone that they're worried about. And that's the toughest thing to explain to someone, is that actually the hardest thing is that no matter what you do, unless that person wants to help themselves, it's very difficult.
yeah, yeah. So you almost kind of go into survival mode, don't you? And you just kind of think,
Mm.
okay, well, I'm going down this deep hole and I have to survive, and maybe that's just a part of you that kicks in.
Yeah.
How long after did you go for therapy? Did is it something that you continue to do today?
Yeah, I mean, so I went to AA for a year afterwards. So I went regularly, once a week, twice a week to AA, and until I felt I was mentally in a place where I felt safe. Now that's different for everyone, right? So there are people that will go for 20 years after they stop drinking; they'll still go regularly. For me, I just felt at one point somebody explained to me biologically what happens with addiction, right? And it was, for me, it was the first time anyone put into words a way that I could understand. When someone put it scientifically to me, what has happened in terms of like serotonin, and how your body has basically sort of wasted that part of your brain. So you've gone past that level of enjoyment from serotonin release,
Mm-hmm.
and you've gone over this sort of cliff edge which you can't come back from, right? You've damaged that part of your brain, and that's it, right? When someone explained it to me like that, I was like, oh shit, right, okay. Well, fine, now I get it, right? And I can move on with my life.
Right.
And that was fine for me, because I'm not a religious person. I'm not I do kind of, I'm quite a rational person, I think. And when someone just rationalized it for me, that worked. So I am super conscious of if I ever felt a bit wobbly or something like that, I would go back to AA 100%, because I did find it very useful for me. But and actually, if I take people to AA meetings as well, people that reach out to me and stuff like that, I think that they're incredibly useful. But for me, I felt I wanted to still be able to live my life, right? And I
Yeah.
didn't want this thing to replace addiction. So
Mhm.
if I just went to AA meetings all the time, I felt I would be as depressed as I was when I was drinking. So I was like, there's got to be more to life than that. And if I can find the right balance of it, I'll be happy as a human being. And then hopefully, as long as I constantly kind of recognize any issues that I have within myself, things will be okay.
Yeah.
Touch wood, 10 years on the 31st, things have gone okay so far. But yeah, it's a really dangerous game. It's I hear of people sort of uh, losing sobriety at very late stages. So it's about sort of recognizing that.
Yeah. And although you were the one who had the addiction, I mean, your family must have suffered a lot,
Yeah.
as well. How did they cope with it?
Yeah. I mean, I had a long talk with my mum. It was about 2 months ago. We sat down and we sort of talked about a lot of the stuff that we've never talked about, and about how I made her feel. And but yeah, she told me about, there was one incident where, I mean, she was so upset and so frustrated with me that she was sort of beating my chest and crying. I don't remember it. I don't remember that. And you'd think you'd remember something as traumatic as that, but for me at the time, is just the horrible thing is that my only priority was drinking. Right, it's all that mattered to me. Um, and that has the power to override the love for your family and your friends and your partners, and that's one of those things that people find very difficult to understand. If you look at something that's even stronger, something like a crack addiction, I mean, it's twice as bad. Those people are trapped in this spiral where the only thing that matters is that drug and getting that high. And you know they will make mistakes and they will break relationships and hurt people unwillingly, but because of that thing, because the power of it is too strong over them. And yeah, for sure, I still do have to build relationships with people and with my family still. And there's they'll never relax about you know how I am. I know that they'll always be worried that it could happen again, and that's a burden for them which I've put on them.
Well,
But
you are around a lot of temptation. So
mm,
do you feel tempted?
no, but and this was something actually I had a big issue with when I came out of rehab, because I think somebody said to me, um, where are you moving to after rehab? And I said, well, actually, I'm going to go and stay at my mum's for a bit. And they said, well, has she removed all the alcohol from her house? And I was like, well, no, but that wouldn't matter anyway. Like, I mean, she could literally put it in a safe with a combination, and I would break that combination. If I wanted a drink, I'd just go to a shop and buy it, right? So
Yeah.
I really felt like that I have to be able to manage my life and be, and be comfortable with that. Um, and at first, yeah, going out with friends and stuff was a little bit difficult, especially when all my friends were chefs. Uh, but I got used to it, and I can dance at weddings now. I can do stuff that I couldn't do at first without alcohol. But yeah, I've kind of become much more myself as a person. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a lot happier.
That actually sounds, I mean, I would consider myself as a normal drinker, but I can't dance at a wedding without without
Mm,
alcohol. I
yeah,
can't dance ever
it took a long
without
time.
something.
Yeah, took a lot
Um,
of encouragement from my wife, that one, but I got there in the end. Yeah.
well, we think of mental health as an emotion, but it's also really physical. So did it take a toll on your body as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first thing, I mean, was weight loss, right? So, I mean, I was extremely thin by, the point of going into rehab, because you have no appetite when you're at that level of sort of addiction. Um, I, yeah, I mean, my liver was rubbing on a, part of my body and bleeding. Uh, I was very ill at the end. Um, but I think I feel healthy now. One
You
thing I
look
do
healthy.
have, thank you. One thing I do have, I think and will always affect me, is I do have a problem with long-term memory. So quite often I struggle with, dates, years. If people say to me, "Do you remember what year this happened?" No chance. I
Okay.
find that sort of thing very difficult, and I think that's, damage from drinking. My short-term memory is really good, but I think that's something from working in kitchens as well, because you're constantly, everything's about the immediate, right? But it is what it is, and I sort of live with that. Yeah.
And so, I mean, you completely immersed yourself in your work.
Mm.
Is that the distraction, the kind of distraction that you needed to stay away from alcohol?
Uh, no, and I am conscious of that. Um, I think I have a balanced life. So I am, I'm extremely focused at work in terms of pushing towards a goal, but I have a family life as well. I have a beautiful wife at home who's amazing. We go out and travel and we do these things. I try not I can fixate on things for a time, but I try not to let it fixate for, for a long, long period of time. So yeah, that's what the whole thing is. It's just about being conscious of how you're behaving, and how you're making sure your mind's not playing tricks on you, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
So after, I mean, after that whole period, which must have been really traumatic for you, you did also suffer some health issues at work, right? So you
Mm,
put yourself under a lot of stress at a time where
yeah.
you started losing your hair.
Yeah. I mean, Holborn's a big restaurant, right? I mean, it's 200 seats inside, more outside. And at the beginning, I really, I joined kind of a few weeks before the restaurant opened, right? And really came into a restaurant that already had menus in place and stuff, and had been reviewed by most of the critics. So my one of my biggest goals was to um, get the critics back eventually, which is difficult. Right? It's nearly impossible, especially in London. It's, there's a restaurant opening every 5 minutes, so it's very difficult to get critics to come back and review again. But I knew I could do it. I had the goal of doing it, and for me, it was very important. So I dedicated myself to really pushing that hard, and that meant at the time, I was at the restaurant a lot. So I was here 6 7 days a week, as many services as I could fit in a week.
Mm,
And reason for that was naivety, and it was that I felt that I was so important to the restaurant that I had to be here all the time. Like, no, it would never function properly without me being here, which was naive, and it was really sort of silly as well. And with that, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stress as well. I would micromanage all problems. If I saw a chip on a table, I would make sure that that chip got sorted out by, a carpenter. Whereas
right.
it's not sort of thing I should be doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember the first time my hair fell out. I bent down to get something in the kitchen, and I looked up, and was one of the it was a commie chef, I think, was looking at me with a sort of panic on his face. And I was like, "What's wrong?" And he was like, "Chef, your hair." And I just felt, and I could feel a big patch missing from my hair. And yeah, and that was the first. I think I went to. No, I didn't even go to a GP about that. I looked it up on the internet. I googled it, and it was like stress alopecia, fortunately it grew back, but it was quite a big patch on the back of my head.
Yeah.
And then it happened again the next summer. It almost like clockwork happened the next year. I was like, oh man, I just remember being in the shower and all my hair like coming out in the shower. It's like this. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, so that happened. Grew back. Was very lucky. And actually didn't grow back white, which happens quite a lot with alopecia. I think grows back in like white patches. And then the following year, still kind of in that period, started to get critics in, right? Amazing. And everything was falling into place and we were getting good reviews. And I was like, right, now it's like it's crunch time. I have to be here all the time. And I had a pain in my stomach at the time and I just ignored it. And then it got worse, it got worse, it got worse. And then got to a point where I would do service, and whilst I was on the pass, I would get this like stabbing pain in my stomach, and I'd have to run out to the back where our dry store was and lie down on the floor until it passed. And I'd be
Wow.
like in agony, like holding my stomach. And I'd go back and then I'd finish service when the pain had passed. And I did that for 6 months.
Oh my
And
gosh, Calum.
yeah,
Wow.
I know, right? But I just felt that I didn't have time to go to a GP. I needed to be here. And then, yeah, I think I'd been away and I think I took a weekend in Spain with my wife. And whilst we were in Spain, I'd sleep in a separate bed because I was in so much pain. And we came back to London and had I think it was a busy week. I think we had a menu change that week, and I was moving house, and I was living in Fitzrovia, which is very close to the restaurant. I was literally moving 2 streets, right? And I was with my flatmate at the time, which was Wei Ting, who's one of the owners of Bao restaurants, and my wife, and we were bringing everything down to the car that night. And it was a summer night, really nice, sort of balmy weather, and I just felt that pain in my stomach, and it was worse than normal. And I sort of knelt down on the floor, and then it got worse, and then I realized I couldn't breathe. And I was lying there on a beautiful night in central London, looking up at the stars, and I remember thinking, I'm going to die. I can't breathe. I couldn't catch my breath. My wife was very upset. Wei Ting was very upset, and they were calling an ambulance. And the guy came, and yeah, I mean that itself was a bit traumatic because the ambulance driver at first was like, he's got indigestion, so just
Oh,
go to the chemist. Yeah, right. And my wife was like, look, he never ever complains, ever. There's something really wrong.
yeah.
And then he took me to hospital. We went to uh, UCLH, which is just in next to Fitzrovia. And yeah, there I was very lucky. They kind of put me into surgery straight away, and it was a stomach ulcer that I'd had for 6 months, and
Wow.
it got so bad, it got infected, and then that that night had burst, and it had burst through my lower bowel and intestine, and the usual pain that I was getting, this sort of stabbing pain, was that ulcer sort of pumping acid out into my body, right?
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, and I was just very lucky, and I remember the doctor saying to me before I went into surgery, he was like, look, you might lose your lower bowel, right? You have to be aware of that, and you need to sign a form to say you understand that. And I was like, get me that form. I don't care. I'm in so much pain. And I woke up and I was very lucky. I sort of came out of that surgery pretty unscathed. And then I was off work for a long time, right? In
Yeah.
that time, we had Grace Dent reviewed us, and it was an amazing review. It was perfect
Yeah.
review,
Yeah.
and I wasn't there. I was nowhere near the restaurant, and that taught me like that I'm not that important. Firstly, didn't have to be there all the time. That my chefs, when given responsibility, stood up and did their jobs and did it brilliantly, and it changed my career. That. yeah, absolutely changed my career.
Yeah, and also I guess, in to put it in perspective, it just made you realize that you've really got to look after your health. I mean, you've
Yeah.
had like all these series of really serious events, which that's kind of like I guess life's way of saying, if you don't look after yourself, then you're not going to have much to come back to anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have your health, you can't do anything. You're useless, right?
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
having been through what you have, is it easy to spot signs of mental health in other people that you work with?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'm very lucky I have a senior team of chefs who are sensitive to that as well. So quite often they'll come to me and say, Chef, have you spoken to this person? They just seem a bit down at the moment or whatever. We are very conscious of each other's sort of mental state and health all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas in, places that I worked in the past, that would be the least concern,
Yeah.
and if someone showed that, they were weak and we needed to get them out of the team.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's, we try and take our time of like making sure people are healthy and well.
Yeah. And what's your advice to anyone struggling with mental health?
Uh, First thing I would do is talk to someone you don't know. All right. There's amazing phone lines out there where you can talk about, things that upset you or bothering you to complete strangers who you'll never meet. And that way you can open up. I mean, that was always the hardest thing for me with alcoholism, was talking to my family and talking to my partner or talking to my friends honestly about how bad it was, because I didn't want them to know, right? Uh, I think if I'd been able to talk to someone anonymously about it, it would have been very different. And I just wasn't really aware of that properly. But yeah, nowadays I would fully, try to get someone to take that first step,
Yeah.
open up to somebody else, and then with the encouragement that comes with that, then you can start to talk to those around you as well.
Amazing. So, I mean, thank you so much for sharing. It's
No worries.
really it's awesome for you to be so honest, and I'm sure this is helping a lot of people out there. Callum, what's next for you? I know you've just come out with your book, which I think everyone should get. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
What
Yeah,
what comes next?
I mean, I've always got little plans on the go, right? But I'm one of these people that doesn't rush into things. I like to sort of, it's very easy as a chef to get super excited about projects. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that's why a lot of chefs get businesses wrong. Um, but yeah, I mean, it'll be pie related. That's all I'm going to say. All right. It'll always be pie related.
Well, we shall keep our eyes on you. And guys, if you want to follow Chef Calum, he's at Chef Calum on Instagram. I have got one more question for you before we go to a very quick fire round. Tell
Yeah.
me something about yourself that I couldn't possibly know.
Uh, I quite often eat really trashy food in secret without my wife knowing. No one knows that. There you go.
What is that,
I'm
like chocolate?
terrible.
That kind of
Oh
stuff.
no, like uh KFC.
Oh, bring it
Yeah.
on.
Quite
Love
bad
KFC.
stuff. Yeah. Like
You're not
uh
the only one.
because I don't know, like I think I'm always surrounded by really good food. Sometimes I want really bad food.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah.
But it's a good bad. I mean, it doesn't, it's unhealthy, but you know what? It is just so
Yeah.
delicious. Every now and then, I think it's good for you.
Yeah,
It's good to
absolutely.
be bad. So we've got a few questions from our lovely Instagram audience, which I'm gonna just shoot through. So the most famous person that you've ever cooked for?
On a global level, yeah. I mean, like Brad Pitt, I guess.
Oh, cool.
Brad Pitt's kind of well known, isn't it? Pele.
Yeah, he's really well known. So is
I mean,
Pele.
yeah. I mean, like, though, yeah, I guess like on that level, like a lot of those guys have cooked for. That's one of the benefits of being at the hotel, right? Is
Yeah,
like if you think about most sort of worlds of like who's the most stratospheric, like famous person, we've had quite a lot of them through the hotels, so we cook for a lot of them here. I
yeah.
was thinking one the other day. I mean, there's a really good example. So uh, it was Jonah Hill, who was in like the guy who was in like Super Bad and films like that. Quite a fat guy, curly hair, really funny actor. I think it's Jonah Hill. I don't know. But
Yeah, oh
anyway,
yeah, yeah, I think I know. He's American,
yeah,
right?
yeah, he was in the restaurant with the Beastie Boys, right? And they were doing a documentary.
Oh, cool.
And he saw the pie room and he wanted to take them in the pie room, and went in there. And Knox, the sous chef that runs the pie room, was giving someone a telling off in there. And he walked in, and I saw him go in from outside, and he came back out, was like, "Oh my god!" And then I went in and saw Knox and was like, "Did you not see who that was?" And she was like, "I don't care. This person was met." I was like, "Oh, okay, Knox, okay." And she's like, Knox is like beyond bothered by celebrities. I remember
Yeah,
going in there once and
brilliant.
she was chatting to Shakira. And yeah, and I was like, you were aware that was Shakira you were talking to?" And she was like,
Who?
"Yeah, yeah, I know, yeah." It's just like not bothered about stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, we're very lucky with that sort of thing here. Actually, I think one of the coolest ones was at the Ivy. That was the first restaurant where loads of famous people came that I cooked at. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was like one late night at the Ivy where we were sort of cleaning up, and Axl Rose came into the kitchen from Guns N' Roses, and that was like pretty bonkers at, young age, especially as I
Yeah,
love
that's
Guns
so
N'
cool.
Roses. But yeah,
Knocking on Heaven's Door, classic.
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that is pretty cool. So did you spend time with him?
yeah. He wanted well French fries, but we had chips
He
for
wanted
him.
French fries.
Yeah, I think he came to the restaurant really late, and they were telling him that there was no more food. And he like
Yeah.
came down into the kitchen, was like, "Can you guys make me some French fries?" I was like, "Man, whatever you want, dude."
Oh,
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
So what's the weirdest dish you've ever made?
Mm. Well, I made a pie that had a clock in it, right?
Clock.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the most nuts thing we've ever done. So we cooked with Tom Kerridge one night in Marlow,
He's
and he said to me,
amazing.
"Yeah, he's brilliant, right?" And he said to me, "If you can do a pie that's kind of a bit out there, a bit different." It was a dinner for 8 people, so I'd seen this old French technique of getting like the image of a clock inside a pie using a sort of very old traditional sausage making techniques. And I was like, I want to learn that technique. Now, the thing that always got me was that when the French chefs would slice it, they would paint the hands onto the clock face with squid ink, right?
Right.
And I was like, I want to do it so that you don't need to do that, so that the hands are there. You have to imagine like Brighton Rock, right? And you break Brighton
Yeah,
Rock and it's got the light. So that's sort of like
that is so cool.
the image of it, of how so. But I wanted it so that when we sliced it, the time changed, and we worked out how to do that technique. And that was like the most nuts thing I've ever done. It took so long to work out how to do it, so many late nights, but
Yeah,
we did it. So when the guests were there, we kind of presented this big like pate en croûte, the style of pie, and it had Pate Philippe written down the side, like Patek Philippe, the watch company. And I said to them, "Look, I made a pie that tells the time, and let's see if it works." So I sliced it, knowing that it was the wrong time. I
right.
kind of showed them, and the guests were like, "Oh no, it's like it says 3 o'clock, it's 8 o'clock."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, you need to shake it sometimes. It's like an old mechanism."
Yeah.
And I sliced it, and I knew it was exactly 8 o'clock where I sliced it. And yeah, that was like a really
Ah,
nice moment. It was really
that is
cool. And
awesome.
yeah, yeah. So that's the weirdest thing I've ever made. Yeah.
So is there a chef that you want to battle in a chef showdown with?
Cool. Who would I like to do that with? I don't know, man. I mean, that could be really fun, right? I'd do it with someone that I'm friendly with.
Yeah.
because it's I wouldn't want to do it with like someone who's just like competitive and out to destroy me. But like, you know what? I spent quite a lot of time in Copenhagen with some chefs there, and they're just like the most amazing, tight knit, friendly group of chefs. And if I could go off and like do it with like Christian Puglisi, those sort of guys in Copenhagen, I'd love that. Love that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite kitchen gadget?
Mm. My brush, like not like egg washing brush. I've got a really nice brush that I clean up my bench with, and
Yeah.
it's very sort of relaxing and I don't know. It makes me feel like I'm doing something nice when I
Yeah.
have tools like that in the kitchen,
Yeah.
which sort of link to art. Yeah. It's a bit pretentious, but
Oh, I think it sounds quite therapeutic.
yeah.
Curse words you use in the kitchen.
Oh, oh, oh. Uh, I reckon I'm quite creative. Like, I don't want to repeat any of them, but I
It's
like,
okay. I can hit the button, so we
yeah.
can get away with anything.
Man, now you put me on the spot. I can't think of what I say generally. I don't know. No,
All right.
I'm not gonna repeat any of
All
them.
right. Okay. All right. Well,
Not
this is a
suitable
nice
for
one.
work.
Would
Yeah.
you rather be a waiter or a dishwasher?
Nowadays, a waiter, right? Before, dishwasher, because I really wouldn't have been comfortable with sort of being in front of a guest. I think nowadays I'm much more comfortable talking to guests, um, and I really enjoy that interaction of sort of understanding about why people have come to the restaurant, what they like about it, what they didn't like. So nowadays, Calum, waiter. 10 years ago, Calum, dishwasher.
Dishwasher. Brilliant. Well, I cannot wait to come and visit you. I'm looking forward to us opening up again, and I really hope you enjoy your lockdown time. Thank you
Thank you.
so much
Yeah.
for your time,
No,
Calum.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I hope you have a lovely Christmas.
I will, you too. So, guys, if you enjoyed this interview, please like, share, and leave me a comment in the comment section. It would be great to hear your thoughts. If you want to follow Chef Callum, he is on Instagram. I'm at Posh Nosh Gal, where you'll find restaurant reviews and recipe shares from amazing chefs out there, and clips from my interviews.